There is a saying that credibility takes a lifetime to build and just a few minutes to be smashed. Well, this certainly holds true as far as public sector companies and their stocks go. For a long time, equity investors, strategic investors also, have been very circumspect about government-run companies and about partaking in them in any way. Simply because when governments change, sometimes the point of view about these companies also change. It can be also fairly random, with decisions being made at various levels which will suddenly impact profitability of a company or the rights of minority shareholders, or just cause destruction in value. Something like that happened with IRCTC, and we've seen that over the last 24 hours. So last evening, this notification became public that the Railway Ministry, which owns over 60% in IRCTC, has decided that from November onwards, the convenience fee that IRCTC charges on bookings online of train tickets, which is 15 rupees for non-AC and 30 rupees for AC, all of that revenue will be split half with the Railway Ministry. This was seen as a big hit to the company. Stock market didn't like it at all, and the stock plunged nearly 25% in opening trade. ET Now was the first to break the news that the government is retracing those steps. They're backing down, and that entire decision was rolled back. We then spoke with all the key stakeholders, the IRCTC chairperson, we spoke with the DPUM secretary. But has the damage been done in terms of credibility? We're going to get into all of that coverage, but first let me play out for you the report from Ruchi Bhatia of ET Now, who broke that story first.
It is a big development coming in early this morning. The government has decided to reverse the decision on a revenue sharing for the convenience fee on IRCTC. Now, this decision, of course, has come in after Railways Ministry officials from IRCTC and DPUM got into a huddle following the massive outcry that we saw on social media and concerns that were being raised on the interest of minority shareholders. Now, as we told you, this decision is coming in light of COVID-19 and of course concerns that were raised on social media as well, and we do understand that a big U-turn now coming in, which was confirmed to us early this morning by DPUM secretary himself, so much so that the stock also made and staged a very smart recovery in trade from in fact down almost about 25% in trade. IRCTC has made a sharp comeback following the ET Now impact.
I may not be the right person to answer this, but the notification earlier issued has been withdrawn is the fact of the day. So it was there, but when we represented to our ministry and explained them the entire position about the market, about the work being done by IRCTC, the amount of revenue that would be required and expenditure would be done, the upgradation that requires certain revenue. So ministry was kind enough to consider the same. And of course, the sentiment of the market was also with us. So it really helped in getting back the revenue in the company again.
ये तो आई थिंक मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ रेलवेज़ ही इस चीज़ को बता पाएगी, लेकिन हमारा ये सुझाव रहा है सभी विभागों को कि जो लिस्टेड कंपनीज़ हैं उनके विषय में जो भी पॉलिसी डिसीजंस लिए जाएं, उसमें केयरफुल उसका मार्केट में क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा उसका प्रॉपर इवैल्यूएशन से ही वो लिए जाए.
क्या फ्यूचर के अंदर भी अगर कोई भी लिस्टेड कंपनी अपने बोर्ड लेवल पर कोई भी डिसीजन रहती है, क्या उन्हें डिपम की अब सलाह लेनी पड़ेगी? क्या आपका इन्वॉल्वमेंट रहेगा उसमें?
जी नहीं, बोर्ड्स इंडिपेंडेंट होते हैं और उनमें अपना डिसीजन मेकिंग चलती रहती है, और ये तो बोर्ड का डिसीजन नहीं था, ये तो आई थिंक मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ रेलवेज़ का डिसीजन था जो कि मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ रेलवेज़ ने रिव्यू किया है.
All right, so while the DPUM secretary is saying things in a very different tone, obviously the IRCTC chairperson and whoever's running the show there is making very different noises. There is a different point of view from the Ministry of Railways. They had to roll this back after all of the furore from investors, but are there warning signs going ahead that need to be noted? Sandeep Parekh, founder of FinSec Law Advisors, on the show with me this evening. Subhash Chandra Garg, former Finance Secretary, also speaking with us. Welcome to both of you. Great to have you on the show. Sandeep, let me begin by getting your perspective. Someone somewhere in the Rail Ministry probably is licking their wounds after having to take back this order. But do we now need some sort of certainty that something like this won't happen again with IRCTC or any other publicly listed company, which is essentially one which has a majority stake of the government?
Hi, Tamanna. Thanks. So before I answer the question, kind of a quick, maybe 30-second overview of my views is, I think, first of all, let me compliment the government for reacting within 19 hours of its completely wrong decision, which I tweeted about. And, I'd kind of given the benefit versus cost. I think the benefit to the government, if you look at it, since they already own 67% and a large majority of that money would have anyway come to them, would be in the range of around 75 crore rupees. And the loss, the cost which I calculated would, in terms of the corporate governance, trust deficit, divestment target for, the valuation, and generally the valuation of all PSU companies would be somewhere in the region of 13 lakh crores was kind of my ballpark figure. So 75 crores versus 13 lakh crores, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. And, you really don't have to look at IRCTC because that's just a fly in the ointment. I mean, you have to look at the big picture about creating a trust deficit and, how it will affect all the future divestments which the government is intending. So I think simply stated, I think it's much less likely that something like this would happen in the future because and maybe if it's maybe a kind of a blessing in disguise that it happened at this scale and it got reversed so quickly. And I think the government hopefully would have learned the lesson. And my guess is it's not going to happen again because the stakes are quite large. If this look at a 2 lakh crore divestment for this financial year, the stakes of even a 5% discount on current valuation would be kind of huge numbers. So I think it's I don't see it happening again, to answer your question.
So it may not happen again in, say, the foreseeable future or in the next 2 years, as you say, but the question, frankly, is larger, right? Governments come, governments go, and the mistrust of public sector companies has been a long-standing one for this very reason. S.A. Garg, give us a sense of how this all unfolds or how this really happens, because government machinery, of course, is very large. How does it work when one ministry or one set of officials feels that it's their right to extract maximum value from a public sector entity which is doing very well?
Thank you. I think this is in a way incidental that I was instrumental to the decision in 2019 to restore this convenience fees for the IRCTC. Because if you would recall that in 2016, at the time of demonetization, under an order issued by the Department of Economic Affairs, the railways was asked to sort of abolish the convenience fees for some time. And in 2019, by the time the demonetization had gone long back, the railways was still not charging it. So it was restored very well. I think that was the right decision to do it. But let's take it the larger issue. All these are PSUs, IRCTC no exception, and the system as it exists, the administrative ministries and the larger government does take a lot of decision about them, whether it is the IRCT or whether it's the, let's say, the PFC, REC, who may be asked to provide the loans, liquidity to the power companies to pay dues, or the oil companies to charge or not charge or pass on the cost of increase or something. It happens everywhere. It's not an isolated, it's not and in this case specifically, since the practice before 2016 was that the convenience fees were shared 50-50 between the railways and the IRCTs. So this was not a very unusual decision to do it. But what happened in the meantime, what Sandeep highlighted, the IRCTC got listed, IRCTC's valuation ran away. I personally believe that IRCTC's valuations were completely unaligned with the fundamentals. If the market believes that the IRCTC's principal income is from this convenience fees, and there is a very large margin. 80% is what profit they make it. And in a normal year, last year was not a normal year, they would get about 800 to 900 crores from this. So all the profits practically are from this fees. And who has given the right to the IRCT to charge this 30? It's also the government, the Railways Ministry. So these are so interlinked that the decisions will keep on happening. I don't see that this is an isolated thing. Once this has been made, this decision has been made, this will not happen again.
No, Sandeep, just respond to that, because the 50-50 fee split is not the first time we're hearing about it. It was like that for some time, then it was withdrawn because of the pandemic, and is now was brought back and then withdrawn because of the furor. They want to sell BPCL, etc. Not want to put out a wrong message. There's no guarantee that they will come back to this, right? They essentially, the government is the primary stakeholder in IRCTC. They decide if they charge convenience fee, they decide how much of it they want to take.
Right. So I think let's go back to kind of somewhat of a philosophical question of so long as these companies are unlisted, the government treating it as, even though they're kind of separate juristic entities, the government treating them as part of its own balance sheet is fine. Nobody really bothers whether it's, 100% owned government entity with the government. Really, it makes no difference. It's one pocket and another pocket. But you have to draw a very thick red line as soon as the company becomes listed, because then there are other shareholders, and you can't just kind of walk over them because it's convenient to charge. So you can charge 50%, 80%, and that's what over the last 5 years it's varied between 80-20, 50-50, and 0-100 as well. So that's fine. You can do whatever you want, but as soon as it's listed, as I said, the thick red line has to come in. And you cannot really compromise the integrity of shareholders in that process. I think this violation does occur in the oil companies, but hopefully after this incident, it will kind of restrict itself to those companies and not to most, at least large majority of public sector companies. So I hope it's a good lesson, and I hope it's also good corporate governance. It's good corporate law with respect to related party transactions, and everything which we kind of talk about in the private sector should also apply to the government sector.
Yep. Now, so coming back to my broader question, Sandeep, do we need a clearer sort of, I don't know, a guideline, a regulation? I don't know how you'll put in place a set of rules. You possibly can't, to give some amount of independence to the boards and to the management of these companies, especially once they get listed, or if they have a strategic investor, that you draw that thick red line?
I think it's already there. It's just that the government still, especially some people in the government, whether it's politicians or bureaucrats, still have that little bit of a my-bap attitude that we gave IRCTC the right to charge this money, and therefore, we get to dictate how the companies run. Unfortunately, they don't see it as an independent legal entity. They don't see it as being run by its own board. So I think, as I said, I'm optimistic that it won't happen for a vast majority of public sector companies. But there's certainly, as Mr. Garg said, there's no guarantee that it won't happen.
Yeah. Mr. Garg, your take on this my baap attitude that Sandeep spoke about. I mean, that's the stuff that investor nightmares are made of when they look at PSUs. And that's why you see, you're talking about IRCTC perhaps as an exception, but most PSU listed companies are, the perception is that they're cheaply valued because no one knows what's going to happen with them tomorrow. How will any government actually change that perception and restore credibility if incidents like this keep happening?
My sense is very clear. I think there is enough evidence also to support that as long as the government is the owner, there is no real likelihood of the PSUs completely operating professionally and without the government interference. This is so aligned to the psyche of the way it is. You take the same case of IRCTC. It's not a board decision. IRCT is not operating in a competitive environment, unlike, let's say, air tickets, where a lot of people make or a lot of companies make the reservations. You have given a monopoly right to IRCTC to make all the railway bookings. This monopoly right has been given by the government. I think we need to move fast towards liberalizing this so that the reservations can be done by private companies as well. And if then the board decides something, and then probably board can, in that competitive environment, can decide, and whatever that decides can be can remain with the IRCTC. So the broader issue has to be looked at from the specific side. In the broader sense, the government has taken initiative of privatizing banks, insurance companies and all. Very successfully, the Air India privatization finally has happened. If the government wants to bring credibility about the privatization agenda, it is that you need to do more transaction. In the and the sort out those policy problems in the railways. One company which is on the privatization block is that Concor, but there that one small big issue has become such a big issue that you can't decide what the rental would be for the land which these container depots have. So the government should sort out those policy issues and then privatize them convincingly if there is a conviction in the market. I don't think IRCTC is on the privatization agenda at all. It is, in fact, the reverse of that. And therefore, IRCTC as an example for privatization is not a great example.
Sure, but let's not go specifically into privatization. I'm talking about government intent in companies that they either want to privatize or where there are minority shareholders as well, which they want to publicly list. So if you look at both of them clubbed under one header, so Air India is a great example of how after trial and error, they figured out they have to just get rid of the whole thing to actually make it work, and that has worked successfully. The LIC IPO is coming up. That will be another big challenge. So interesting discussion on what is a very timely topic on a very timely day. IRCTC has come back from that blooper. Let's see going ahead whether that ghost of concession split returns to haunt it. Thank you so much, Sandeep and Mr. Garg, for joining us on the first discussion this evening.